Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to coverage of my round 7 game from the Golden State Open. So this is the final round and it all comes down to this one game. My standings so far in the 4 games I played, I scored 1.5 points. And because I faced all higher rated players, that's basically break even for me. In fact, I looked at the tournament. They would post your pre-tournament rating and your estimated post-tournament rating, and it had me picking up 3 rating points. So just doing about par for the course, I guess. So in my final round, I'm once again facing a high-rated player, and if I get a draw, then that means I will end with a positive score in terms of rating. My rating will pick up because one more higher-rated player and one more draw would actually increase the number of points I would gain a little bit. And if I won the game, I would have a pretty nice boost to my rating. And if I lost the game, then I would my rating would decline. So it all comes down to this one game, whether it's a good result for the tournament or a bad result. And I was feeling pretty good. I took a bye in round 6 so that I could sleep late. Round 6 was earlier in the morning. The other games were starting at noon. The early games are starting at noon. I think for the final round they moved the early game up to the morning game up to 10 or 10:30. Anyway, so I got to sleep in late by skipping that one, and I came to this game in the middle of the afternoon feeling pretty good, and I got paired against a player that I've faced many times. Actually, it was funny. He's someone who was also from the same chess club. It's always strange to go travel to a tournament and then be matched against someone from your own club, but it happens. Anyway, his rating is 1913, and my rating for the tournament was 1815, and I had the white pieces. So I started off with d4. I went knight f6. I went c4. He went e6, and I like to allow the Nimzo-Indian, so I play knight c3 here. If you want to avoid the Nimzo-Indian, of course, knight f3 is it's actually the top choice, and knight c3 is the second choice. But I've played the Nimzo-Indian with the white many times, and I'm very familiar with it, and so I'm pretty comfortable playing this way. I play e3, which is the Rubinstein variation. He castles, and we go down the main line here. I go bishop d3. He goes c5. I go knight f3, and he goes d5. And even though this is the most popular setup in the database, I actually don't see it so often in practice. I think players are not always so willing to put all 4 pawns opposing each other in the center like that. It creates lots of different possibilities, and in fact, I'm always never quite sure what to do in these situations myself. Should you take this way, or just leave the tension? I decided to castle here, which turned out to be the main move, and I am accepting the possibility that black can create an isolated queen pawn. Black could play like this. Black could take on c4. I take back with the bishop, and then he could take here, and he could take on d4, and then I would take back. And but this isolated queen's pawn position is not bad for white. White's got a slight edge in development. Well, it's black's turn to move. So, but I guess the development edge mainly comes from the fact that this bishop is a bit shut in, and black has space and good squares for all his pieces. So this is a good IQP position for white, and I would be happy to play it. And if if black takes the knight, I would take back with the pawn. This would create a hanging pawn setup for white, but I would also have the bishop pair and open lines. So once again, I would be happy with that. Actually, so the d takes c4 is one of the moves here, but the main way it's played after bishop takes is to play knight bd7. So I think this is the main line here, and then queen to e2. Kind of an interesting looking position. So the tension is maintained here. He may decide at some point to give me an isolated queen's pawn. Let's see, queen to e2. Yeah, okay. He may decide at some point to give me an isolated queen's pawn. I can always decide to take back with the knight as well if I don't like that. But if I do that, I also have to worry about him taking the knight and giving me an isolated c-pawn. So, it's just an interesting position, and playable for both sides, of course. So he continued with knight c6, is also fairly well known way to play, and I decided to go ahead and resolve the situation in the center with c takes d5. Just to continue looking at main lines, though, the main line here is a3, kicking the bishop, and the bishop takes, and d takes c4, b takes c4, and queen c7. And I think that's probably the best way to play. I think the next time maybe I'll play like that. I kind of like this setup. I've gotten this kind of setup before, and this exchange here is always not a problem, because I'll just take back with the pawn, and I'll have one more pawn in the center than black does. So, and but I'm not going to be in any hurry to take this pawn either, because that would just leave me with doubled c pawns. So this tension can remain here for quite a while. There's ideas for white to push this pawn forward and maybe bring the bishop here and put pressure on that pawn. Black can support the pawn this way. And, you know, a lot of interesting games have been played from this point. There's also the idea of pushing forward the e-pawn and bringing my dark squared bishop out on this side of the board. So interesting position, and playable once again for both sides. But I decided to go ahead and resolve the situation in the center and give black the isolated queen's pawn if he allows me. So I took on d5. I started by taking this way, and he took back. And then I was thinking about this, and you know, certainly I could take. Pawn takes, bishop takes, and but this is an isolated queen's pawn position, which is good for which is okay for black. I can't say it's really good for black, but his pieces are well posted. There's probably still that slight opening edge for white. I mean, I have nice attacking ideas on the king side with the bishop on this diagonal already, and probably my queen coming here. I'll do a little dance to organize the bishop and the queen to set up a battery along that light squared diagonal. Or queen to e2 and push the e-pawn forward to liberate this bishop. I have various ideas, but his pieces are well posted to push that pawn forward and dissolve it. So, you know, I would say that position is about even. I tried to do something a little bit different here, and I played the move queen c2. And I think technically this is a mistake. So the chess engine wants to play to move c4 here. And I realized c4 was a possible move. It's just that most of the time you don't really want to play that move. But, well, it kicks my bishop back, and then he could play something like rook e8 to prevent my pawn from coming forward. I was going to say, the reason why players don't like to push that pawn forward and get this kind of structure is, number one, it takes the pressure off the center, so there's no longer any danger to my c-pawn. And number two, these pawns can be somewhat fragile. I mean, I can try and undermine it with moves like b6, b3 rather, and e4. But it looks like in this particular position, black can keep a pretty good clamp on e4. Let's see, I've got my queen and my knight pointing at that square, but he's got his rook and his knight pointing at it as well as the pawn. So it's going to be difficult for me to push the e-pawn forward here. And black has more space. So this is better for black, and I think you know, I didn't really appreciate that during the game. I realized he could play this, but I didn't realize what a nice position that would be for black. Well, my opponent didn't play that way either, and like I said, I wasn't really expecting him to. It's just a little bit unnatural from the point of view of the black player to push that pawn forward and give up the pressure on the center. He decided to take here. And I took back with the knight, and my idea was to get this kind of position. He takes, and I take. And this is a very interesting structure. You may think that absolutely nothing is going on here with all the pawns being symmetrical and these two facing off. This is known as the ram structure. The two pawns are kind of locked horns here in the center. Neither one can move, and they both control the squares of their neighbor in front of them, the neighboring squares of the pawn in front of them. And it's kind of a fixed structure. These pawns are hard to attack because they're shielded from the front by the opposing pawn. So it's a static structure that what the evaluation depends on is how good the pieces are around this structure. And I thought I would have better pieces, and so that's why I went for this transformation of the pawn structure. For one thing, this my dark squared bishop I think is going to get outside the pawn chain. It can go either to g5 pinning the knight, or f4, which is also a good diagonal, whereas his dark squared, or his corresponding bishop, that would be this light squared bishop, it has this diagonal, but I've got control of this square and it doesn't hit anything on that square. So I was thinking that I would actually have the better pieces here. And once you've got a fixed pawn structure where you have the better pieces relative to that pawn structure, then that's an advantage that you can play around with for a long time. Let's see. So he played h6. So I put my bishop on this f4 square. And now maybe I have ideas of knight to b5 in the right circumstance, coming into c7 or d6. He played the move bishop to e6, getting his bishop off the back rank. He probably wants to put a rook on the c file. And but now you can already see the difference, right? This is a passive position for his bishop. Let's see, I played rook a to c1. He played rook to c8. And now I don't want to allow him to take here, and in a situation where I have to take back with a pawn, I always want to be able to take back with a piece and maintain this pawn structure. So I moved my queen out of the way. I go queen b3 and hit his bishop. And he decided, rather than to retreat the bishop, to go ahead and take. So he takes, I take, he takes, I take. And we get this simplified position, queen, rook, and two minor pieces, where the pawn structure is still the same. And I have the bishop pair, and I have the more active pieces in general, because his two minor pieces are both sitting here looking at his center pawn. So I am feeling pretty good. And in fact, the engine evaluation, which was more or less even at the beginning of the sequence, is now starting to favor white. So the chess engine is starting to pick up on some of my advantages. I think mainly the chess engine values the bishop pair. And there's enough open lines here that the bishop pair advantage should show itself. So anyway, my opponent is a good player. He plays knight e4, activating that piece, and kicking my queen. I don't want to. I want to trade here and give him this passed. Well, it won't be a passed pawn, but it will turn my pawn into an isolated pawn that he can attack, and he can actually defend his pawn with a move like f5. So I don't want to trade there. So I moved my queen. It took me a while to figure out where to put it, but I thought queen b4 was a good square to put it on. It's staying away from the diagonal of his bishop, and it's starting to put pressure on the queenside pawns here. He went b6. And right here I played h3. The chess engine in this position gives an interesting move here. And f3, I really did not think about this at all. f3, though, is just chasing that knight off the good square. I'm controlling all of the forward squares that knight might jump to. So it really just has to go back. Although the chess engine also finds a nice move for black here. It wants to put the knight on the d6 square, which currently I control with my queen and my bishop. So, but the chess engine throws in this move a5, and the queen doesn't really want to go hide in the corner at a3. So queen back to e1, and now the knight can come to this good square on d6. But it seems like white is doing pretty well here. Anyway, I kick the knight off that good square. I can play b3 to keep it from coming to that square. I might be able to target this b pawn. So yeah, this is the best play for both sides, and keeping a pretty big advantage for white. Let's see, I played h3. It's just giving a retreat square for this bishop in case it gets attacked by a pawn or something. Although it also had the square e5, but well, maybe it could have been chased off of that square too. Anyway, h3, not the most accurate move there. He went queen to d7. And now I find a good move. I think I want to put my rook on the c file, but I don't want to just trade off all the pieces. If all the pieces disappear from this position, then it's completely drawn. The pawn structure is so symmetric. So I want to keep enough pieces on that I have ideas of maneuvering my pieces around and poking at different targets. So I found an idea of a way to keep his knight or his rook from coming to the c file and opposing my rook. I played the move bishop to a6. And I like this move. He thought it was a good move too when we talked about the game afterwards. It's showing the power of the two bishops. The power of the two bishops is that they can control between the pair of them every square on the board. They can look at every square on the board, and they can get there quickly when there's open lines. So I was able to go directly here, whereas a knight, a knight can hit every square on the board, but it takes it a while to hop around to get to that. It's just a little more cumbersome. And so let's see, he played rook to d8 here, and right here I start to lose my my way a little bit. I should, or I could just continue with rook c1, which was my original idea. But I was looking at this position, I was thinking that his queen was a little short of squares. It wasn't, for example, if I were to play bishop b5, which is what I ended up playing, he couldn't go to the c file, or it wouldn't do him any good to go to the c file because I could play rook c1 with tempo chasing it again. And I thought it might be nice to disrupt this battery here, because maybe he has ideas of sacrificing on h3 now that I've put that pawn up there. So those are some of the things I was thinking. But the chess engine says no, rook c1 is one of the best moves here. I think I think all the top moves were pretty much equally rated, so it's a good move in this position and keeping a strong advantage to white. And it's kind of a lesson I need to learn. Sometimes you just have to, even if you don't see the immediate follow-up, go ahead. If you can control an open file, go ahead and take control of that, and then work from there. Find out, try and figure out from that point what's the best way to proceed. Another idea here, which is also in the engine's list of top moves, is to play a4 and just directly go after these pawns on the queen side. So it looks pretty good for me. I played bishop b5, which is not a bad move, but it's not the best move. It's giving up some of that advantage. It's true the queen has limited squares, and sometimes pushing the queen around a little bit will result in an interesting result. So maybe it wasn't such a bad idea. And then I played rook c1. But at this point, rook c1, he can oppose the rook. So that was probably wrong. Let's see. The best move here, and the move that my opponent was a little bit afraid of, was the move queen to a3. It's a very nice idea. The queen goes to a3, and now I could follow up with rook c1, and if he ever plays rook c8, I have this skewer. So I've managed to control a few more squares over on the queen side, and I'm still going to be able to get my rook to the c file, it looks like. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good way of playing. So I still, at this point, have some advantage. Let's see, he can fight back a little bit. He's not completely lost here. So he can actually play the move bishop to, or pawn to a6 to kick my bishop around. And if I take, and then he's got queen a7 pinning the bishop, and it's a little bit awkward to unwind from here. So that's okay. So actually the chess engine gives the best move as the bishop coming back to d3, a5, rook c1, rook c8, and then a bunch of exchanges, and pretty much leading to a position where white is only slightly better. But anyway, queen a3 would have been a good try here, because there were also ways to go wrong there. He might not have found that a6 move, for example. But rook c1 is a little too simple. He can just oppose it immediately with rook c8, and that's what he did. But I had a plan here. My idea was, I didn't want to allow the trade, and my idea was to continue. At this point, really, I have nothing better than to take, and then it gets to basically an even position. But like I said, I had a plan, and my plan was to interpose my bishop, hit his queen, and also prevent this exchange. Also, I'm not worried about the exchange. My bishop isn't pinned there because my rook is defended. But I did overlook one thing, which is that he can just take the bishop. And he took it. and I resigned. So kind of sad finish to this tournament. But well, let's see. So anyway, yeah. So it turned out to be a bad tournament for me. I lost rating points, and I've had a couple other bad results recently. So I've been demoted. I'm no longer in Class A, but I'm down to Class B for the moment. So my goal for the rest of this year, I guess, is to get back to Class A. But let's pause for a second and consider the tournament overall. Well, first of all, this blunder at the end of this game. This was, after 5 hard rounds, and even though I guess I was feeling okay, I felt like I'd slept okay, and I had rested by taking that bye in round 6. It just, I guess, wasn't enough. Somehow the accumulated effect of playing 5 intense chess games in 4 days was enough to somehow disturb my chess playing brain that I should make such a move. So I guess that's what happened there. But in general, let's talk about my play in the tournament. I felt playing pretty well. I found a nice the game in round 2 was a very nice game. There was no blunders in that game, and a pretty nice tactical victory. In my game in round 4, which ended in a draw, I was pretty happy with my play in that game as well. I was lucky that the blunder didn't cost me the game, but I found an interesting plan in the middle game. And even though the chess engine said I was worse, I mean, it gave me interesting play. I thought that was good. And in the 2 games that I lost, I actually played reasonably well in the middle game and in the opening, had an advantage, and then just blundered. So I guess the story is, if I want to maintain myself as a Class A player, I can basically play well enough. I just need to reduce the number of blunders, which is why that's what I emphasize when I'm talking about my games. Things like the blunder check. But somehow all the things I'm trying are not yet working for me. If anyone else has ideas on how to not make so many blunders, I would be welcome to hear them. And in any case, that's it for this tournament. I'm going to go back to my regularly scheduled videos, and I will see you then.